Hey everybody, so today we're going to be talking about texture. Texture is really important when we are looking to draw something that is realistic. And when you are going to be doing this exercise, you want to either gather some things from around your house, like either something that's wooden or a rock, or maybe even a fuzzy sweater or something like that that you can see the texture of, or having printed out pictures or a picture on your computer to look at will help you figure out how to draw texture more realistically. We're going to be using graphite pencils. If you want regular pencils, you can also use a mechanical pencil, an eraser, and then a blender. If you don't have a blender, you can use your finger, a tissue, or even a paper towel. So let's go ahead and get started. So I traced a post-it note on my paper 6 times to get those squares on there, and I decided to try wood grain for the first texture that I was going to draw. I took my mechanical pencil and I started to sketch out lightly where some of those main shapes were, and then shaded them in very quickly with my regular pencil. Then I went over the entire square with a light coating of gray using the side of my pencil, and then I blended that in using little circle motions with a paper towel. After that, I took a regular drawing pencil and I decided to work on the details, putting in those lines and the directional marks of where the wood grain was going, what little details were added in there, and shading in where some of those shadows would be. It's really important to look at either the reference photo or the object itself when you're trying to draw your details. This is so you can know where to put the right directional lines. Sometimes you can go in and you can shade a little bit with your blender. And then I actually used an eraser to go in and erase some highlights into my gray and put more details in with my mechanical pencil. When I'm shading, I use the side of my pencil. When I'm doing details, I use the point. As I get closer to finishing, I will use the very tip of a mechanical pencil and press a little bit harder so that I can get some bolder details showing up on that wood grain. I fill in some last details and last line work, and it's done. The second texture is water drops, so I got some shapes put on my paper, and then I picked out where I want the light source to be coming from, and that is where you're going to put the highlights for all of your water drops. Then you start to shade in that side of the water drop with some darker gray, but don't fill in your highlight. And then I blend with my blending stump, going from the dark gray to a light gray, and then leaving the majority of that water drop either light gray or white. Remember to not fill in your highlight. You want to keep that little white spot white. Then I go back in with one of my dark pencils and really darken the side next to the light source, and I blend that in. I can clean up any mistakes that I made with an eraser. And then I'm going to start to do the shadow cast by that little water drop. And the shadow is strange because halfway in that shadow there's going to be a light spot because the water is see-through. So part of the shadow is going to be dark, and then the middle of the shadow will be light, and then the edge of the shadow will be dark again. So you can see how there's a little light spot inside of that cast shadow. And I can erase some if I need to, but I do like to use my mechanical pencil to clean up any edges. The third texture is going to be bricks, And you're going to put in rows and then put in some lines where you want your bricks to go and alternate them for each row. Then you're going to shade in between your bricks just to add a little bit of a shadow. Once you get that all completed, I like to round out the edges of my bricks so that they're not super sharp and perfect. Then you can shade in the entire square gray. I want my bricks to have a darker value to them. So shading them in and then blending them with my paper towel is a really good start. Now I can redefine any of those in between sections with my pencil and redefine any of those shadows. Now I'm adding some little scribbles, but doing little tiny scribbles and then even blending them a little bit helps to add to the rocky texture to the brick and giving it a little bit more of a realistic feel. There I'm using my blender just to lightly go over some of those scribbles so that they're not as defined and dark. And I can add a lot or a little, and I can even go in with my eraser and then I can erase as well and use my eraser as a drawing tool. Again, I'm going back in and defining some of the in-between brick parts. And that's my final brick texture. So the next texture that I want to try out is grass. And this can be deceptively hard. A lot of people scrub their pencil back and forth. I do not do that. I am pulling my pencil up from the bottom and moving upwards with one stroke. And then I can do short strokes or long strokes. And you can overlap small and long pencil marks in front of each other. And then you also want to curve the lines that you create, because grass is not just straight up and down. It's growing, it's moving with the wind, it's being tromped on by people's feet. So I want to make sure that I'm curving and overlapping those as well. I can also put some shading and blending at the bottom to make it look like there's dirt down there. And then I also like to add little leaves or little buds of things that are growing, like weeds or flowers, just to give a little bit more texture and interest to the grass. And you can do this as much or as little as you want. The next texture is going to be fur, and I'm going to start out very lightly with my mechanical pencil. And a lot of people will just, again, scrub back and forth, similar to doing grass. And I do not want to do this. I want to make individual lines and think about which direction the fur is going to go. And I do like to look at some sort of a reference photo and pick out different clumps of fur. And I'm going to start to slowly build up the value. And as I want to get darker in certain areas, I will get my darker pencil, or I will build up my shadows with the mechanical pencil. But the key is to think about how the hair or the fur is flowing and give a little bit of curves to that texture. Don't just go straight back and forth. Actually think about how that fur is going to be moving over the surface of whatever creature or animal you're going to be drawing. Using a combination of mechanical and regular pencils really helps. And that's the finished fur texture. Last texture that we're going to be doing is a rock texture. So I like to fill my square with all different sizes of different rock shapes. They don't have to be perfect. And then I shade in between all of those rocks, so the background is going to be nice and dark. I'm using a regular pencil and filling it in, making sure it's not super messy, but filling that all in. Then I'm going to blend it with my blending stump to make it nice and smooth in the background. And I can take the extra graphite that's on that blending stump and actually fill in the rocks with a light gray. So I'm using my blending stump as a drawing tool. Then I can go in and redefine the edges of the rocks that may have gotten disturbed by blending. And I can redefine those edges. I can make some deeper shadows in the background. This is when I like to use my eraser as a drawing tool, and I'm actually erasing in some highlights into the stones and scrubbing in some lighter areas. And then similar to the brick texture, I can go in and I can make little scribbles, not huge ones, just little scribbles in little areas to give shadows and make it look like the shadows are jagged like the edge of rocks. And I can do this on as many or as little rocks, and I can blend as much or as little as I want. But adding those shadows and highlights into the rock texture is really going to make it look more realistic. You can push your shadows as dark as you want. Try out some really dark shadows and then see how it looks. You can clean up any edges with your eraser, and that's your finished rock texture. And here is our final paper with all of our textures on it. The more you practice, the better you will get at drawing texture. So good luck and have fun.